Tara is like the real life Wendy Rhodes.
It's Wendy.
Wendy.
Dr. Wendy Rhodes.
If you've ever seen the series Billions, Wendy Rhodes was the straight shooting therapist that helped everybody raise their performance level.
As Pitbull said, get ready, because here I go.
The gas in your tank and how far you can get on it is really determined by the health of your nervous system. One good question that everybody can ask themselves is, what did I used to love to do that I no longer do anymore?
How important is it to unplug and get back in touch with who we are from a resilience perspective, or does that matter at all?
The sense that we need to be out in nature more than we need to be in front of a screen.
Tara Miller, so great to see you again. It's been a while, my friend.
I am thrilled to be here. Good to see you as always.
So you say it doesn't matter how smart you are or how hard you work. If you're operating off a weak nervous system, you're not going to be successful.
Because the gas in your tank and how far you can get on it is really determined by the health of your nervous system, your ability to be resilient, your ability to face challenge and overcome and persist and persevere. So all of those characteristics lay on this foundation of a well-regulated, healthy nervous system. So if you don't have that and you're just putting in the hours and you're just pushing hard, there's a level at which you will stop. And you will either burn out, you will suffer some kind of health issue, emotional, mental, or physical because of it, or you just won't feel satisfied and be able to push to the next level. All of these things can happen. The key to really long-term success is that ability to have a regulated nervous system that can handle stress and pressure and keep going and keep going and keep going. And the way you do that to get more gas in the tank is to work on your nervous system health.
So I want to ask about dig into this a bit more, because I watch a lot of videos online. There are a lot of videos meant to get you to work harder and grind and suffer and all that. And of course, hard things have their place in our life. But I think a lot of people don't even really talk about the nervous system. In fact, until I crossed paths with you, I would have never considered the nervous system as part of, I should pay attention to that. So can you explain a little bit to those who are listening here when you say our nervous system or a regulated nervous system? Because I think a lot of people don't actually know what that means.
It's true. It's really birthed out of psychotherapy, and that's where I learned it and applied it to working with trauma cases. And it's about how our mind and body are intricately connected in this constant feedback loop. It's that lizard brain that some of us have heard about, that reptilian mind, your early primal brain. It gets the information from your surroundings, inside and out of your body, 24/7, and responds before we have an emotion, before we have a thought. So it's really working with the part of your brain that's working on a survival mechanism, that's putting you into elements of fight or flight or rest and digest. Those are more familiar terms that we've heard of, but it's the autopilot that keeps us alive that we don't even think about. But when we learn about it and we learn how it operates, it does respond to our thoughts. It does respond to some of our emotions. And so there's ways that we can influence it and broaden it so that we have a little more control over it, so that we're influencing our resilience. We're not allowing ourselves to go too far into fight or flight too regularly, or at least we're recognizing when we're going into that state, because it's not just for survival in the wilderness when a bear comes out. We're going in and out of fight or flight all day long. We're coming out of it naturally, for the most part, all day long. And when we get stuck in either of those elements, fight or flight or rest and digest, we become compromised, because we're only supposed to go into those modes very short term for survival only and then come out. So when we're under chronic stress or stressful situations, we're going up, we might be staying stuck in it. What it does is it drains resources, not just from our mind and from our cognitive ability and our emotions, but it also depletes our physical setup, our immune system, our hormones, our stress chemicals. So it's all intricately connected with how we're living our lives as modern day humans, but it's this unevolved brain center that is designed to keep us alive and is way overworked right now. So we learn how to work with it in trauma to help people come out of that stuck trauma state that they get into that really compromises all of their health. And we can apply it to anybody. Anybody who's a human animal can learn how to get a little more regulated, how to understand what's happening in their physical body and how it's impacting their mind and vice versa.
Now, I want to ask this question to you because you are a therapist, and that is, often we'll hear people talking about the subconscious, right? The power of the subconscious and to live consciously. Maybe you're watching a video by Joe Dispenza, and he talks about how it's important to live intentional and to try to live consciously, but then the subconscious is going to run the majority of the show. So is there a difference between when people talk about the subconscious and what you're talking about with the nervous system? Same thing, just different language or not?
It's different. It's different because in this moment, the nervous system is operating all by itself. And so I can manipulate it a little bit with what I know to give me advantage or to help me get more recovery or rest. The unconscious, though, is influencing it also because the nervous system doesn't respond to time. So it responds to past memories, past experiences. It will go into fight or flight in this moment if I tell you a story of a traumatic event. It's not happening right now, but I can pull from a memory and that will light up my nervous system as if it's happening all over again. The same happens with just the state that we exist in. If we feel a little more high strung, it's all given information from our past. The subconscious is programmed from all of our experiences in the past. It connects with the nervous system in that it's trying to bring up information to keep us alive or to prevent future pain or suffering or heartache. And it does run the show on that unconscious level because it really doesn't want us to suffer and die. And that's the purpose of it. But we have a lot more content in there now than maybe our caveman ancestors did as far as what is going to keep us alive and keep us from pain. And we all have a different perspective on what suffering we need to be protected from also. But that does come from the 95% of our life that is run from our unconscious mind, which is our personal subjective history.
So would you sort of look at that like the unconscious mind can get triggered and then it triggers the nervous system?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I know that trauma therapy has evolved a lot in, let's say, the last 20 years. And can you explain to people listening the differences, let's say, dealing with the trauma 20, 25 years ago in therapy versus how we would approach it today?
And how I would approach it is based on my training, so it's different than a lot of other modalities. But early trauma therapy was really about talking. You go into a therapist's office maybe for multiple years, maybe for the rest of your life, and you talk about your trauma. And they might give you empathy, they might give you support, they might encourage you to try and think of it in a different way or process it in a different way. But they're really working with the newest parts of the brain, the frontal lobes, your thinking brain, and your emotional centers. They're focusing on the parts of your brain that get the information last. And the way that I work with trauma is I work with the nervous system, which gets the information and has the experience first. It holds it in the body. It holds it in the memory as that unconscious kind of level of activation. And we don't work with it with talking about it. I would never take somebody through a traumatic experience where I have them tell me the story of the most horrific events of their life start to finish. Because what we know is that lights up the neural pathways around that experience when it actually originally happened, and it floods the body with stress chemicals as if it's happening again in this moment. So we're forcing them to relive horrible moments. And then we're asking them to think about it differently or ask them how they feel about it. That doesn't actually heal trauma. It doesn't move it out of the system. It doesn't help the nervous system process it differently. It keeps it stuck there, and it's a really good model for long-term clients in psychotherapy. The way that I worked with it was different. It's based on a modality called self-regulation therapy. and it works specifically with the nervous system. So we're looking at parts of the story, not in sequence. We're connecting them with how the body is responding so we can see if they're going into fight or flight, because we don't want them to relive that. And then we're helping them have tools where we can educate them on how to notice when they're getting activated in their own body and use their body as a resource to help it come out of that fight or flight moment. And so we're cutting the story up in pieces. We never get the whole story. What that does also is it lays it back into their memory banks, into their unconscious programming differently, rather than using the same wiring and repaving that road over and over again. We're chopping it up, we're confusing the memory banks, we're placing it differently, and all of the time we're checking into what is your body doing, what is your biology saying about whether you're in fight or flight or whether you're in a regulated state. And so we just keep practicing getting them regulated, getting them cooled down over and over again until it becomes a new brain habit, and they didn't have to suffer so much along the way with the old trauma each time.
So we're dealing with the body, which then helps deal with the mind.
Yes.
What do you think when people will do those body connection exercises, like they'll say, hold your arm out and think of, negative thoughts, and then they push your arm down and then think of positive thoughts, and then, your arm doesn't go down as much. And I'm always wondering, like, okay, well, are they just a subconscious bias there? But what do you think about that?
That muscle testing, there is something to that muscle testing, that kinesiology approach. There's an old but great book that a lot of people recommend for entrepreneurs, actually called Power versus Force. And they talk about how they've scientifically measured that, the different, how that shows up in people, the wisdom of the body in that unconscious space. So we think our thinking brain, our cognitive function is running the show. It likes to think it's running the show. There's so much complexity beyond that, and so much more wisdom in those earlier parts of the brain, the primal parts of the brain, including what's stored in the body that we haven't even begun really to discover. But I think there's validity to that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's always fascinating to me, but it's just one of those things that it's, I don't know that anyone's done any study, like a blind study or something. Maybe they have. I just need to research it more. I remember being in Spain and having to go for emergency surgery. I thought I was dying. I literally thought I was going to die. I texted my kids, told them I loved them, and it turns out it was painful, but I needed a gallbladder removal. For any of you who ever had that happen, you know how painful it is. But after that experience, I was like in the hospital for 5 days. I got out, and you and I had a conversation after. You may not remember this. And you were giving me some advice about how to process that moment. Mm. And one thing you had said was having the mentality that I survived that. And I can't remember exactly how you put it, but I remember I was on a train back to southern Spain, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have that moment where I reflected back and think, hey, I survived.
One of the questions that we'll ask in trauma therapy, one of the first questions is not what happened to you, but when did you know you survived? Everybody that's been through a significant, especially medical, but any accident, you go into full metabolic output for survival. It doesn't matter if it's, when you look back on it, if it's like, oh, of course I was going to survive. It was just a minor fender bender. It doesn't matter. In the moment, your nervous system responds full force. And it only comes out of it, to a certain degree, depending on what you've already been through in life. So one of the best questions to ask when you've been through something is that moment, because we all have had it. When did I know I survived? Often it's when people are out of it, when they get out of it and they're starting to come down into a more relaxed state, or they feel a sense of safety, or they're around familiar settings. But there's always a moment of, if I look back at it, when did I know I survived? And then with that question, as you think about that moment, because it's such a relief to know you survived, your entire body will shift with the parasympathetic state that we just encouraged, with that rest and digest, just from that question, because it tells the brain, you don't have to be vigilant anymore. Look, we survived. And then your breath will change, your heart rate will change, your posture will change, everything shifts with some really pointed appropriate surgical questions. And that's one of the best ones is when did you know you survived? Or if it's just a period of challenge in your life, when did you know it was over? Or when are you going to know it's over? So that you're giving the brain a resource to look for where it can say, okay, I don't need to have the alarms on anymore, and it shuts them off for you. Just by power of suggestion. Yeah.
No, it was great. I remember that. And I remember doing that exercise you gave me. I'm curious, when did you know that you wanted to become a therapist? What was behind that decision?
Yeah, I never wanted to be a therapist. I was a journalist at the time. And that's what I always thought that I had wanted to be until I realized how lousy the pay structure was for local newspaper writing. But I was getting my own trauma work done. I had had a series of really awful experiences in a very short period of time, and I had always thought that I dealt with things really, really well, kind of stoically. And then I just got pushed to the limit. So our resilience kind of capsizes when our resources are outnumbered by the events in our lives. So for me, I was just going through a divorce. I was a single parent to 2 kids, 1 and 3 years old. I had a car accident. I had a life-threatening MRSA infection. The next month, they thought my son, a little later on at 3, that he might have early-stage leukemia. So I was going through one event. It just felt like every time I stood up, I got hit with something pretty severe, beyond just a divorce. The divorce actually was probably the easiest thing out of everything I dealt with that year. It turns out he didn't have leukemia, but it didn't matter in the moment. In the moment, that was the prediction. And then by the end of that 1 year, I think there was another car accident that happened in there. And then my ex-husband, the kid's father, committed suicide. And so that happened in the capsule of a year, all of those events. And it was beyond what I had the resources to cope with. So what triggered me to go into therapy was not the trauma, because I was kind of hanging on well, I thought, but my body wasn't healing from the car accidents. And so I was referred to somebody that does self-regulation therapy. Turns out she's the co-founder of it. I took a year. I went and saw her. I didn't need any medication to get through all that I was going through. You know, we were left with nothing. We had poverty on top of that. And we went through all of this, and I was stabilized with this nervous system work, with not having to relive the horrors that had already happened that were kind of plaguing us as a family, but really helping my nervous system come out of fight and flight that it kept getting tossed into. By the end of that year, not only did I no longer meet criteria for PTSD, I didn't have allergies anymore. I didn't have asthma anymore. I didn't have fibromyalgia, migraines, like a laundry list of stress-related disease that they wanted to kind of stack up in my medical file no longer existed or presented, simply because my nervous system was trained and it was repeated until it was a habit that I could be out of fight or flight, that everything was going to be okay, that the crisis had ended, even though we were still in it. It encouraged my nervous system to get into a place of regulation where I could actually heal. And not only did I heal physically, I healed emotionally, mentally, and I got that nugget of post-traumatic growth that you look for when you're going through challenging times, that allowed me to radically change my life, go back to school, became a therapist, ran a practice for 12 years, and then I've pivoted again, and I'll pivot again. But it gave me lifelong resilience that I didn't know was possible, and a very robust nervous system that comes with the confidence of I could probably get through anything.
It's amazing how all of those tragic events then, in many ways, made you more healthy in the end.
It's incredible, with the right tools to help manage. And that was the key. It was the neuroscience of this approach was so effective that I felt like I couldn't not go and train in it to the highest level that I could to help other people that were in similar situations, because it was so profound in all of the healing that it did for me.
So I know that, as you shared, that was some incredibly tough moments. And we get those sometimes in life, right? Just a crisis, someone dies, someone gets a terminal illness, we get a serious illness, and they're really acute stressors. But then there's also just the prolonged stressor. I think about how, you raised two amazing kids as a single mom by yourself, and you were running your own business, running your therapy practice. So that's like a different kind of stress, just prolonged. What do you say to people who, to help manage that? Because I think that's like most of the world, especially for business owners, you just live with that.
It's true. And some people really thrive in it. They're naturally designed to kind of lean into challenge or lean into it. They get a bit of a chemical hit from it, perhaps, or you can get addicted to that chemical hit. But there is a personality that is kind of wired to lean into that and to be really equipped for that. And we're all born with a different capacity. There's a genetic influence. There's, what happened in pregnancy, labor and delivery, early childhood that shapes all of our capacity for stress and trauma. I think for me, going through really huge, significant trauma, like that year, gave me a different perspective on chronic stress and kind of the other things that are going to go wrong as part of the human experience. So I'm able to cope with them and have a different perception about them because I've been through what I didn't know that I was ever going to get through. So there is perspective that comes from going through the big challenges. But you're right, the smaller challenges of the day-to-day, they creep up on you. They kind of layer up. It's like a cup filling with water. Whatever cup you came into adulthood with, size and shape, and however full it was from your childhood, then you go into just chronic stress in modern society as part of the human experience, and it's inescapable, and your cup starts to layer up. And if you're not doing things that are going to help regulate it, help kind of move some of those layers off, you get an overflowing cup. And that's when you start to see symptoms of chronic stress that we're all really familiar with, but that can lead to really severe health issues.
Do you ever have days, as much as you know about resilience, as much as you've trained your nervous system, do you ever have days where you think, I want to quit, or I can't do this anymore? And if you do have those days, do you ever have those days?
I have those days.
Okay, then my
I
next
have
question
those
is,
days. I made a big move after raising my two kids for 20 years, all on my own. And I went through all of that, sold everything, made a big move. And when I moved, I had just turned 50, and I thought, it might not be equipped for what I have just done. And I felt really tired, and I felt really like, I don't know how much gas is left in my own tank. And I really had to be persistent in the lifestyle things that I know work for me to move through that. And a lot of things are going to play into that. Age is going to be one of them. The things that you were able to push through at 30, it's harder at 50. It's going to be harder at 60. It's just like how it goes, but we live a long time. My grandma's 103, so I have a long ways to go still. So, it's finding things that bring you joy, finding things that are healthy for you, doing the work or touching in with somebody professional when you need to recalibrate, and really being on top of that so it doesn't continue to creep up, so that when you start to feel overwhelmed, you're aware of it and you're doing something about it rather than just thinking, okay, like next week I'll get to it.
do you think the younger generations are less resilient?
I
And
do.
why do you think that is?
In some ways, I don't know that it's a bad thing, because I see the younger generations in some ways having better boundaries. The healthy ones are able to set boundaries around work and life. They have expectations around wanting to have a balanced life, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a refreshing addition to the hustle and grind culture that maybe you and I were part of as business owners that can be depleting. So I don't think it's all bad. Why I think that is, I think our society is very fast paced. I think in a lot of ways, therapy has become so mainstream, and it's given this over validation of everybody's emotions at all times. So it's created, we have this culture of being very self-focused from maybe whatever the parenting strategies are, But now every emotion is validated and every expression deserves everything to stop and us to give our full attention. And we have a label and a name for everything. And it's almost like we've become, in wanting to be self-aware, we've become too addicted to self. And that, I think, is a depletion for resilience, because you have a world around you and most of the world isn't going to care what your feelings are in that moment. Resilience comes from not having everything go your way, not being understood, not having all the rest you need, and still knowing that you have whatever you need in you to get up and go and push and do the things you don't want to do. So too much comfort is not good for resilience. We don't want to add uncomfortable things if we're in the middle of trauma, for sure. But if you're not in trauma and your life is pretty comfortable, it's interesting to see the lack of growth in those scenarios, but also the lack of resilience when something really bad does happen. People flatline out. They can't continue to function.
I remember getting bullied in grade 6, and for a long time, and by a lot of classmates. It was just this crazy situation that happened. And as much as I dreaded going to school during those months, at least I got to leave and get on the school bus and come home. There was no social media. There was no anybody talking about me on Instagram or Twitter. So I can't imagine that sometimes now when I think about the kids coming up and what they have to deal with. But also, let's talk about that idea of unplugging, right? So naturally, I did that as a kid because there was no internet back then. And so you came home and it was like, okay, well, let's go walk down by the creek. How important is it to unplug and get back in touch with who we are from a resilience perspective, or does that matter at all?
It matters. It matters that you're customizing what your lifestyle needs to be supportive of your nervous system. So it matters in the sense that we need to be out in nature more than we need to be in front of a screen. We need to have time that's quiet, whether we're meditating, whether we're doing walking meditations, whether we're just outside being still. We don't do enough of that. We don't allow ourselves to be bored. So the constant stimulation is spiking a fight or flight reaction that's unpredictable, and it could be 24/7 depending on how addicted we are to our device. So I think the ability to unplug is a combination of what do you need to support your nervous system on an animal level. We're all human animals. That survival brain needs the nourishment and the peace that human animals that animals can find, that they thrive in. So we need to create that for ourselves. That often should include unplugging, but we also just need to be aware, whether it's a device or a bad relationship or no work-life balance and you're getting pinged all the time, we're not designed to be stimulated all day long. And so we're going from a screen to a Netflix this attention span disorder that we all have because of social media does keep our nervous system kindled. It will make it harder for you to get through challenges over time, and it might not feel like it right now, but one day you will feel overwhelmed and not maybe know why.
I like what you said about in a sense, customizing. In other words, what works for you is not necessarily the formula for me, that we have to find that out for ourselves. So how does someone do that? How does someone find out what's a good way for them to recharge?
A lot of it is trying things out. We're put on this earth and we're designed, if we're healthy, to be able to explore and expand and experience. Like, this is all part of what we're designed for, to be curious and to try new things. When we come under stress, we often shrink our lives to feel like we're more in control of a smaller bubble and that we feel like we can contain it better. But it's contraindicated to how we're designed to grow and to experience life. So I would say experiment with the things that other people are doing. I mean, we get a ton of that on social media. So for breath work, some people love breath work. It works for them. Try it out. Doesn't work for me. I don't like it, so I don't do it. If a cold plunge makes you feel rejuvenated or feels like a reset, do it. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. So it's about being able to try new things, which the brain loves anyway. The brain is fertilized when we try brand new things we haven't done before. And that's part of it. You want to keep your mind in this space of seeking and exploring and growing. And I think one good question that everybody can ask themselves is, what did I used to love to do that I no longer do anymore? Because we've often ditched our hobbies or the things that used to bring us joy because we started adulting. And so what did I used to love to do? And when people go back to something that lit them up or made them feel passionate or made them feel relaxed, I mean, it doesn't have to be all about relaxation. It should be about joy. When we go back to something that we used to love to do that we no longer do, it often will spark up more life, more resilience, more vitality. And that's what we're looking for. It's that balance of, yes, I need to rest and digest. I need to know how to unplug and relax and all those things. That's important for recovery. I also am designed to experience joy and pleasure and vibrancy. And if I don't go out into the world and seek new things and people, experiences, conversations, I'm going to be missing out. So there's the balance of having one that keeps you grounded and having another one that keeps you alive and dreaming.
If you're listening, I hope you got that question that she asked, because I think it's so powerful. What did you used to do that lit you up that you no longer do? I would have to think about that, but I know there's probably a few things in there that I've let go. Mm-hmm. What about you? Is there something that you love to do that you are still doing now?
I really love playing tennis. I've had to do less of it because of a car accident, another one. But I'll get back into it. I love to play tennis. It's outdoors. It's social enough. I'm a bit of an introvert, so too much socializing, doesn't make me feel lit up, but a little bit. I was a dancer when I was young, so I love competition. So I love athletics and sport and that competitive spirit. That kind of brings out the best in me, especially if I'm feeling depleted, especially if I've gone through a big transition and I'm feeling a bit fatigued. It doesn't make me feel better to kind of sit and meditate. It actually makes me feel better to go out and do something. And so tennis is something that I picked up in my late 40s, and I just love it. So that'll be one thing I do. I think it's important to always have a running bucket list and always be looking for what new thing can I try this year, because you never know when something's going to make you feel like you're 10 years old and have, the world at your fingertips.
Someone needs to create a list of optimal activities for extroverts and then for introverts so that you can pick from the list. Because tennis is a great thing, right? Like, you don't really talk in tennis except when you first meet. It's a little bit like going to the movies. That's why I like the movies. You meet your friend, you talk for 15 minutes, then you watch the movie, then you get out, what'd you think? And then, hey, see you later. It's like the perfect activity.
It is. You get shared experience, which we all need more of. We all need more community. But you get it on your terms. And I think you get to a point where the customization of your life is what is going to help sustain me on my terms, and what's going to bring me joy on my terms, and what's going to help me relax and regulate on my terms. And that's important.
I love that. I want to talk a little bit about stress. And I was just reading, and I'm forgetting now where I read this, but what they had found was that it wasn't so much the stress that you're going through right now, but rather your mindset about the stress. For those who thought, no, stress is great, it actually makes me perform better, then stress impacts them less versus a stressor for someone else, like, I'm so stressed. That's going to have a bigger toll on the body, which seems strange because that's all just like a shift in mindset, but then that can absolutely change the physical impact on stress.
Absolutely. The nervous system not only doesn't follow the rules of time, it responds past, present, and future, whether it's real or not. It also doesn't matter if it's real or not. It responds to something that's really happening. It's also responding to what we're imagining is happening or how we perceive it to be happening. So if we have an idea, a self-concept, an identity about ourselves that says, I'm like resilient AF. I can whatever. This is stressful, but I'm equipped. Your nervous system responds in a very solid way to give you what you need to go through that. The brain wants to give us what we're asking it for. We often just let the autopilot run it, which is some of our old programming or our old insecurities. So it feeds us back what we're looking for and what we want. If I want to be more resilient and I have that mindset that everything I do, I'm going to be able to conquer, the brain tries to organize to give me more of that. if I'm hit with stress and I start sharing with people and thinking to myself, because our nervous system's responding to our thoughts also all the time, I'm not going to make it through this. I don't know if I can do this anymore. It switches on a chemical flood in my nervous system of stress hormones, and it impacts my immune system. It'll impact my hormones. It'll impact my vitality, my mood, all of that. I will respond to the stress as if it's bigger than it is. So there's a way that we can use perception to minimize what we're going through so that we can get through it. Or if we allow it to maximize and hold us back, that's exactly what will happen. So how it impacts the body really does depend on the stories we're telling ourselves about it.
As a mother, what are some of the things you did with your kids, raising them to try to instill some resilience?
I was annoyingly optimistic. There was always a solution, a resource, a patient outcome. There was always going to be, there was never a message that we were not going to get through whatever we were going through. The message was always, this is going to be over one day. This is temporary. We're going to get through this. And then life is going to be, and I painted this picture of how amazing life was going to be once we got through whatever the challenge was. And it's not like life turned out that way. There was no fairy tale. That doesn't exist for most people. As children, their nervous systems needed to know that we were on the yellow brick road. Like we were going somewhere great, and that's all that mattered. And that mom was okay. Mom was okay. She was going to make sure everything was okay. As long as mom is handling stuff, we have confidence that we don't have to worry. So I didn't overshare with them. I didn't leak my nervous system onto them. I made sure I took really good care of my mind and my body and my nervous system, because that's what children template off of. So I always was aware that they were growing their brains off of my state, and that I really needed to preserve and be in the right state for them to do that on an unconscious level, but also that they just started to develop the tools and the habits of forecasting positive events, being optimistic, knowing that we were capable, knowing that, shitty things were temporary, and that on the other end of that was something better, and that we were always going to be equipped to go through that. And I also apologized a lot, because when I screwed up, I didn't try and hide it. I was really authentic with, if I had a day that was a struggle, I didn't leak the emotion to them, but I said, yeah, I didn't handle that well, I'm sorry. So we learned to be very real with each other, but always forward focused and always optimistic.
So more than saying the right thing to your kids, it was more just you setting the example of being a resilient parent.
I always was aware that they were watching, and that I couldn't fall apart and be defeated. It wasn't an option for me, because I knew I had witnesses. And that, being an empty nester now, it's harder to find motivation without them watching so closely. Like, that was motivating and kept me on top of things, on top of myself, because I knew I had witnesses. They still, we're very close. They still witness my life. It still motivates me. But there's some separation now that is different, and I have to be more disciplined about that now.
I think a lot of parents make the mistake of oversharing and wanting to be a friend with their child, which it's great to have a strong relationship, but kids, it's just not the role for them to have to try to process their parents' pain. It's a heavy thing.
It makes them feel insecure and like, maybe mom's not okay. Maybe we're not going to get through this, and that's not the truth. But their nervous system will take that on, and they don't need that. So it is that space of, I'm your leader. I'm what you need to template off of, and I'm not your friend. We're great friends now, but even still, there's a separation. I'm your coach now, right? But I'm not your friend. I'm not going to share everything I'm going through with you. I'm going to be authentic when it's a teaching moment. I'm going to be selective. I'm going to be appropriate. But mostly, I'm going to look at how I want you to get through this life and make sure I make choices that are as closely lined up to getting you there as I can.
And just for people listening who are parents and you're thinking, oh, I've got to be this strong, stoic pillar. That's not what we're talking about, because you, after all of that first tragic year you went through, you lost someone very close to you.
I did. Yeah, and it was, I think, in less than 3 years after the one death, then I kind of felt I had met the love of my life. We can call them soulmates or whatever. I really thought I would end up with this person, and he died tragically in a motorcycle accident very suddenly. And it was right when I was graduating from my master's at Gonzaga. So I was dealing with shock and grief. I was delivering my final presentations. I'd go into the bathroom and have a panic attack or a meltdown, and then I'd go back into it and do it again. And I was almost preconditioned from the previous traumas to know that this was going to suck, but I was going to get through it. And I didn't give myself another choice. I didn't give myself the option to quit. I just found a way to dig in and get through it. But the pain of that loss lasted many more years than the first one, and it made it difficult and lonely for sure.
But your kids would have seen that, right? Back to my point about
They saw the grieving. They saw the shock. They were in the room when I found out. They saw, and right away my daughter said, "Mommy, I'm scared." And I had to cut it off because I didn't want her to go in it with me. I had a friend there. I reassured her. I went for a walk. I, lost it out in the forest. But there was an awareness of, hold it just for a second and then go process it somewhere else. But she didn't deserve to go on the roller coaster of that at that point with me. So, they saw and have seen what grief looks like, because that's a real experience that people go through. They've seen me continue to move forward in my life and to continue to seek joy in spite of pain and loss and suffering. That was very authentic. I just didn't let it, when I was overwhelmed, I didn't let it bleed out so that they were overwhelmed with me. They saw it in context, in droplets, but not in the full expression.
That's an amazing example of just strength and resilience on your part to compartmentalize that and then step back into the duty, which I say duty as a parent, right? That there's a role.
Yeah.
And whether it's a parent or leaders, sometimes we go in and work with companies, and I just tell leaders, like, when you become a leader, you don't have the right anymore just to walk into work and be all angry or be all sad. You just don't. And, they might argue with me on that, but you just take on a duty of, okay, I've got to be an example here. Even though you're not the parent, it's just a role that you play. Doesn't mean that you have to be perfect either, but it's having that strength to regulate your emotions.
And know that you don't want to stifle them. You don't want to damper them and stuff them in and not have them. But the more regulated you are, the more resilient you are. You have more capacity to do that compartmentalization where you go, this is going to come out, and grief especially needs to come out, all out. This is going to come out, but it's not going to come out right now where it's going to hurt her or, anybody around me. I need to protect her in this moment, and I will have time to make sure that this comes out appropriately. And I think having a great therapist that can do this kind of work, the nervous system work, is very good at steadying the ship when things get rough, and allows you to make sure that you're processing what you need to. You're not over processing, you're not kind of malingering with it, but you're not holding it in either. But it gives you that space where you go, I feel this and it's huge, but it can't bleed out right now. And so I'm going to do this job here, and I'm going to make sure I get this out here. And just having that ability to say there's a time and place where this gets to come out, but this is not it. Same like leadership, exactly.
And for everyone listening who's a single parent, just kudos to you. I think I have so much respect for single parents and the amount of resilience that it takes to play that role and to play both parents. And it's difficult. So kudos to all of you listening. As we close out here, Tara, if you could give people sort of a workout plan to increase their resilience, right? So all of us could use to get more resilient. What would be some things, let's say you're a personal trainer, but for resilience, which I know you are, what should be some things that we can put on that list to strengthen us?
So you want to make sure you're taking care of your physical body, because if you aren't getting enough sleep, if you have chronic pain, if you are hungry, like, your biology will ramp up your nervous system. So there's some basic things that you need to take care of your physical body, and that includes fresh air, sunlight, movement. Find movement that you enjoy so that you're moving on a daily basis. That really helps. And then I would say the one exercise that I give most people, that I say, if all you do is learn this, it will help. It's remember to use your imagination to your advantage. So we call it baseline in the work that I do, finding baseline. It's basically thinking of a time where you felt your absolute best. And Tony Robbins does a lot of this too. It's NLP based, but when did you feel your absolute best? And if I have someone describe to me in detail when they feel their best in life, or where they felt their best, and they tell me the surroundings, the sense, the sounds, how they felt, and I say, what do you notice right now as you tell me about this? I'm looking for what they notice in their body. So if you imagine it yourself, your favorite place to be, the place where you feel your best, or after a workout when you feel your strongest, notice what happens in your body. Your posture changes, your breath will change, your mind will slow down, it will adjust. You will feel differently in your physical body. So if you can take your imagination and put it to a positive place every day to start your day, and notice how your body responds, that alone gives you some control. Anytime you feel like you're coming out of that and you don't want to be out of that, you can go back into that imagination, release those chemicals, self-medicate, slow it down, regulate down, and it gives you a 1% lower set point than you had before. If that's all you did was find that one set point in a day and you kept going there, it becomes a brain habit that you start your day with, and you get to find a way to control how regulated you feel. The more you do it, the easier it gets, and then you just think of Maui or wherever it is in the midst of something, and it will bring you down a notch. So that's one of the best tools, is really be aware of where your mind is going, and keep it on something positive, or even fantasy, or something that you're looking forward to. But your mind is going to go negative. You want to take it positive. But what you want to notice is when you're in a positive state and you're thinking positive things, what's happening in your physical body, because that connection is what gives you the regulation.
That's fantastic. Well, Tara, thank you. And for those who want to reach out to you, is the best place to go to braincoach.co?
It is.
So, as I mentioned in the intro, Tara is like the real life Wendy Rhodes. If you've ever seen the series Billions, Wendy Rhodes was the straight shooting therapist that helped everybody raise their performance level. That's who Tara is. So if you would like to find out more information about working with her, or even how she could help out with your company, then go to braincoach.co. All of that will be in the show notes, of course. And what I'm really excited about is your book, which you've been working on for so long, called Defiance. Yes. And it will finally be out in January. Is that correct?
That's right. It will. It has taken a long time. It's about being defiant in life when you get thrown stuff, and developing, using grit to get next level resilience for your life, and being very proactive when you're under challenge. So I'm excited for it.
Fantastic. So everybody look for Defiance in January. And Tara, thanks again for being here. I just want to say this, you are a very special person to me. We've known each other for a long time now, 10 years at least. And you have been a great friend. There's been times where I've gone through crises in my life where I called you up and say, hey, give me perspective. And you have. I think you're just a wonderful person. And you've gone through such tragedies, and yet you've turned those into something purposeful, and now you are a great blessing to others. So I just want to honor you for that. Thank you for taking the time to being with us, and you shared some great things today that I know everyone listening will benefit from.
Thank you. My honor, for sure.
All right, Tara.